The Arizona Territory stretched out before Samuel Blackwood like an endless sea of dust and promise. At 45, his weathered face told the story of 2 decades spent in the unforgiving West. The crow's feet around his eyes from squinting into the merciless sun. The creases on his brow from too many hard decisions. As he guided his chestnut mare along the narrow trail winding through the rugged mountains, Samuel adjusted the worn leather holster that housed his Colt Peacemaker, more out of habit than necessity. The Winchester rifle secured to his saddle had been his faithful companion through the Apache Wars, the cattle drives from Texas, and countless lonely nights under stars that seemed close enough to touch. The setting sun painted the distant mesas in hues of amber and crimson, a beauty that still managed to catch Samuel's breath despite his many years in these lands. He'd come to Arizona as a young man, seeking fortune in the silver mines, but the earth had other plans for him. Now he worked as a liaison between the cavalry at Fort Bowie and the Apache who had been forced onto the San Carlos Reservation. It wasn't a job that earned him many friends on either side, but Samuel had long ago learned that a man who stands between 2 worlds rarely belongs fully to either. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know which city you're watching from. Samuel dismounted at a small creek, allowing his horse to drink while he refilled his canteen. The water was cool against his parched throat, a blessed relief from the day's heat. He checked the position of the sun. Perhaps 2 hours of daylight remained, just enough time to reach the small trading post at Oak Creek Crossing, where he could secure lodging for the night. Enough time, that is, if the trail remained clear and his luck held. But Samuel had been in the territory long enough to know that luck was as changeable as the desert winds. "Easy, girl," he murmured to his mare, as she suddenly lifted her head, ears pricked forward in alert attention. Samuel's hand moved instinctively to his revolver, eyes scanning the rocky outcroppings above the creek bed. Years in Apache country had taught him to recognize the signs, the unnatural stillness of the air, the absence of bird calls, the prickle of awareness across the back of his neck. Someone was watching him. He spotted movement among the rocks, just a flash of color, gone almost before he could register it. Samuel relaxed slightly when he realized what he'd seen, the distinctive pattern of an Apache woman's dress. Not warriors, then. Still, he remained cautious as he slowly raised his empty hand in a gesture of peace. "I mean no harm," he called out, his voice carrying across the small canyon. "I'm Samuel Blackwood, liaison from Fort Bowie." He waited, knowing that patience was essential when dealing with the people, as the Apache called themselves. After several long moments, a young woman appeared from behind a boulder, regarding him with wary intelligence in her dark eyes. She wore her hair in the traditional Apache style, with a center part and tied with strips of cloth. Her deerskin dress was adorned with intricate beadwork that marked her as a member of one of the more prosperous families. Behind her, a second woman emerged, similar enough in features to be recognized as her sister, though perhaps a year or 2 younger. Both women carried small knives at their belts, but their posture wasn't overtly threatening. "Blackwood," the older sister said, testing his name on her tongue. "The man who speaks with forked and straight tongue together." There was neither accusation nor praise in her voice, merely a statement of his reputation among her people. Samuel had to admire her command of English, likely learned at one of the mission schools that had sprung up around the reservation. "I try to speak only with a straight tongue," Samuel replied, keeping his hands visible. but I serve as translator between your people and mine. Sometimes meanings get twisted in the telling." He offered a slight smile. "I'm heading to Oak Creek for the night. The trail is open?" The younger sister stepped forward now. "It is open," she confirmed, exchanging a glance with her sibling that contained some unspoken communication. "But night comes quickly in the mountains. There is a storm." She gestured toward the western sky where, indeed, dark clouds were gathering against the setting sun. Samuel frowned, reassessing his plans. A mountain storm was not to be taken lightly, especially on unfamiliar trails as darkness fell. "Is there shelter nearby?" he asked, trying to recall the terrain from his previous journeys through this region. He knew of no caves or abandoned homesteads within an hour's ride. The older sister regarded him thoughtfully before speaking. "Our father's winter camp is beyond those rocks. You may shelter with our family until morning." The offer was unexpected. Apache families rarely welcomed outsiders into their camps, especially white men. Before Samuel could respond, she added with a hint of amusement, playing at the corners of her mouth. "Unless the man who rides between two worlds fears to sleep under Apache blankets." A challenge, then. Samuel recognized it for what it was. A test of his character, his willingness to trust them as he asked their people to trust him. "I would be honored by your hospitality," he replied with a formal nod. "I have tobacco to offer your father, and news from the fort he might wish to hear." The sisters exchanged another look, this one marked by surprised approval. The younger one smiled, revealing a warmth that transformed her serious face. "I am Nahimana," she said, touching her hand to her chest. "She who is respected. My sister is Taluta, red-blood woman. Our father is Hanska, the tall one. He trades with settlers sometimes. Perhaps he knows your name already." Samuel mounted his horse, following as the sisters led him along a narrow path that wound between massive boulders and through a dense patch of juniper trees. The trail emerged into a small, hidden valley, sheltered on three sides by rocky cliffs. Several traditional Apache wickiups, dome-shaped dwellings covered with brush and hides, were arranged in a semicircle around a central fire pit. Women worked at cooking fires, while children played a game involving small painted stones. Several men sat in a group, deep in conversation, that ceased abruptly when Samuel rode into view. A tall Apache man rose to his feet, his bearing dignified despite his advancing years. He wore a calico headband and a mixture of traditional clothing and trade items, a sign of his position, bridging the old ways and the changing times. This, Samuel guessed, must be Hanska. The man's face revealed nothing as Samuel dismounted and approached with his hands open at his sides in the universal gesture of peaceful intent. "Father," Taluta spoke in Apache, her words just clear enough for Samuel to follow with his limited grasp of the language. "This is the man Blackwood who speaks between the blue coats and the people. We found him at the crossing. He seeks shelter from the coming storm." She paused, switching to English. "He brings tobacco and news." Hanska's weathered face remained impassive as he studied Samuel for a long moment. Finally, he nodded once. "The man called Blackwood may share our fire tonight," he declared, in surprisingly good English. "The storm brings many unexpected things to our doorstep." There was something in the way he looked between his daughters and Samuel that suggested layers of meaning beneath the simple statement. As Nahimana took the reins of Samuel's horse, leading the animal to where several others grazed at the edge of the camp, Samuel reached into his saddlebag and produced a pouch of quality tobacco, a gift he had learned was appropriate and appreciated. He presented it to Hanska with a respectful nod. "Thank you for your hospitality. The mountains are no place to be caught in a storm. Nahimana says you ride to Oak Creek," Hanska remarked, as he accepted the tobacco with a nod of appreciation. "What business takes the man between worlds there?" Samuel was conscious of the others watching this exchange. Letters from the agent at San Carlos to the trader Cooper, and medicines from the fort doctor for the mission there. Simple tasks, but necessary ones in maintaining the fragile peace between worlds that seemed destined to collide again and again. A rumble of thunder echoed through the canyon, and all eyes turned toward the sky. The storm clouds had swallowed the remaining daylight, casting the valley into premature dusk. "Come," Hanska said, gesturing toward the central fire. "We will eat, and then you will tell us this news from the fort." Toluta appeared at Samuel's side. "You may place your belongings there," she said, indicating a small wickiup slightly apart from the others. "It is for visitors or young men who have no wife yet." There was a hint of mischief in her eyes, quickly masked as she turned to help the other women with the evening meal. The meal consisted of venison stew, wild onions, and a flatbread made from mesquite flour. Samuel ate with genuine appreciation, complimenting the women who had prepared the food as was proper. As the evening progressed, he shared what news he carried, mostly administrative details about supply deliveries to the reservation, but also word that one of the hunting parties that had been feared lost had returned safely to San Carlos. This last piece of information earned him nods of approval. It concerned distant cousins of Hanska's band. Rain began to fall as they finished their meal, first a gentle patter on the brush rooftops, then a steadily increasing drumbeat that signaled the arrival of the full force of the storm. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, illuminating the camp in brief, ghostly bursts of brilliance. The Apache seemed untroubled by the tempest, continuing their evening activities undisturbed. Some of the men, including Hanska, gathered to smoke the tobacco Samuel had brought, speaking in low tones about matters Samuel could only partially comprehend. Nahimana approached where Samuel sat, slightly apart from the main group. "The storm will last until morning," she said, settling beside him with natural grace. "It is good you did not try to reach Oak Creek tonight. The path becomes a river when the rains are heavy." Samuel nodded, grateful for both the warning and the shelter. "I've seen men drown in desert lands," he agreed. "The water comes too quickly, and the dry earth can't drink it fast enough." He studied her face in the flickering firelight. She was beautiful, in a quiet, thoughtful way that seemed at odds with the hardships of her life. "You speak English very well," he observed. "Did you attend the mission school?" A shadow passed across her features. "For 2 summers," she confirmed. "Before our brother was killed by soldiers who thought he was stealing cattle. After that, our father took us away from that place." She spoke matter-of-factly, without evident bitterness, though Samuel could sense the pain beneath her words. "I'm sorry about your brother," he said simply. There was nothing more to say, no justification he could offer, no platitude that wouldn't ring hollow. Too much blood had been spilled on both sides of a conflict that seemed to have no end. Nahimana accepted his condolence with a slight inclination of her head. It was 4 summers ago. The world turns, the rain falls. She glanced toward where Toluta sat with a group of women, her hands busy with some kind of beadwork. "My sister took it the hardest. She and our brother were born under the same moon," She wanted to pick up his rifle and fight, but our father said no. He said we must find another way to survive these times. Samuel followed her gaze to Toluta, seeing now the banked fire in the young woman's eyes, the tightly controlled energy in her movements. "And did you?" he asked. "Find another way?" "We try," Nahimana replied with a small smile. "Our father trades. I learn the white man's words and ways." "Toluta," she hesitated. "Toluta learns too, but she keeps the old ways closer to her heart. She believes we must bend like the willow in the storm, but never break, never become something we are not." The rain intensified, drowning out further conversation. Samuel excused himself and made his way to the visitors' wickiup, ducking through the low entrance. Inside, someone had already prepared a sleeping place. Hides spread on a bed of fragrant dried grasses and pine needles, with a trade blanket folded nearby. The simple hospitality touched him more than any luxury hotel room could have. He removed his boots and gun belt, stretched out on the makeshift bed, and listened to the storm rage outside. Sleep, however, proved elusive. The unfamiliar surroundings, the conversation with Nahimana, and his awareness of being both guest and outsider kept his mind active despite his physical weariness. After an hour of restlessness, Samuel sat up and reached for his journal, a habit he had maintained since his first days in the territory. By the light of a small candle someone had thoughtfully provided, he began to record the day's events. He was so absorbed in his writing that he didn't immediately notice the rustle at the entrance to the wickiup. When he looked up, Toluta was slipping through the opening, followed closely by Nahimana. Both sisters carried small bundles and wore expressions that mingled determination with something more difficult to define. "The roof of your dwelling leaks," Toluta announced, without preamble, though Samuel had felt no drops. "We bring dry blankets." She set her bundle down and regarded him with those intense, dark eyes that seemed to challenge and evaluate simultaneously. Samuel closed his journal, acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation by both Apache and white standards. Two unmarried women in a man's sleeping quarters after dark would be cause for scandal in any culture. "Your concern is appreciated," he said carefully, "but I wouldn't want to cause any misunderstanding." Nahimana's laugh was soft and musical. "There is no misunderstanding, Blackwood. We come because we choose to come." She unwrapped her bundle, revealing not blankets, but a small clay pot and several leather pouches. "My sister and I have been talking. We have questions that need answers, and you are a man who walks between worlds." Toluta knelt on the soft bedding, her movements fluid and confident. "Questions about your world," she clarified, her voice low but clear above the drumming rain. "About the future that comes, whether we wish it or not." There was no mistaking the intensity of her gaze now, nor the purpose behind this unconventional visit. Samuel set his journal aside, increasingly certain that this encounter was venturing into territory far more complex than he had anticipated. "What kind of questions?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. He had learned long ago that assumptions were dangerous things in cross-cultural exchanges. Nahimana opened one of the pouches and removed a handful of what appeared to be dried herbs, which she sprinkled into the small pot. "Our grandmother was a medicine woman," she explained. "She taught us that knowledge is power, and that power comes in many forms." She looked up at Samuel through her lashes, "including the knowledge of men and women together." "Our father does not know we are here," Toluta added, her directness both disarming and alarming. But our grandmother would understand. She told us that when the world changes, women must be strategic. We must gather knowledge as well as power. She leaned forward slightly, the firelight catching the planes of her face. You're ours tonight, cowboy. The English phrase sounded both practiced and provocative on her lips. Samuel took a measured breath, recognizing the delicate balance of the moment. I'm honored by your trust, he began carefully, but I'm not sure I understand what you're asking of me. Though in truth, the direction of the conversation was becoming increasingly clear and increasingly complicated. Merely an exchange, your knowledge for ours. She gestured at the dried grasses beneath them. The storm rages outside. No one will disturb us until morning. Samuel found himself at a crossroads unlike any he had encountered in his years on the frontier. These women were offering an intimacy that went beyond the physical, a rare glimpse into their world, their thoughts, their strategies for survival in changing times. Yet the potential for misunderstanding and harm was immense. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman, he said finally. But wisdom also teaches caution. What you propose could bring consequences neither of us intends. We have considered the consequences, Nahimana responded, her voice steady, and we have made our choice. She poured a small amount of water into the pot with the herbs and stirred it with her finger. This tea helps ensure there will be no unwanted children from our meeting. Another piece of our grandmother's knowledge. Taluta's eyes never left Samuel's face. You speak of respect for our ways when you sit in council with the chiefs and the bluecoat leaders. Is that respect only words? Or do you truly believe we have the right to choose our own path? It was a challenge Samuel couldn't easily dismiss. Throughout his years as liaison, he had advocated for the Apache's right to self-determination, even as government policies increasingly restricted their freedoms. Could he now claim to know better than these women what choices they should make with their bodies, their knowledge, their futures? It isn't a matter of rights, Samuel said quietly. It's a matter of consequences. In my world, men often take advantage of women in vulnerable positions. I don't want to be that kind of man. Nahimana's smile widened slightly. And that is precisely why we chose you, Blackwood. A man concerned with consequences. A man who sees us as people with minds and choices. She handed the small pot to her sister, who drank from it before passing it back. We are not children needing protection. We are Apache women preparing for a future we can already see coming. Outside, lightning flashed and thunder rolled across the canyon, emphasizing the sense of being suspended in a moment out of time, a pocket of possibility between worlds. Samuel felt the weight of history pressing down, all the broken promises, the cultural misunderstandings, the tragic consequences of contact between his people and theirs. Yet here, in this small wiki-up, were two women determined to engage with that history on their own terms. Tell us about the women in your cities, Taluta prompted, settling herself more comfortably on the bed of straw. Do they have power? Real power? Not just the power to choose which man will rule them. It was not the direction Samuel had expected the conversation to take, but he welcomed the shift to safer territory. It's changing, he answered truthfully, slowly. There are women now who become doctors, lawyers, even professors at universities. Women who own property and businesses in their own names. But they still can't vote, still struggle to be heard in matters of government. Nahimana nodded, as if confirming something she had already suspected. And in matters of the heart, are they free to choose? More free than in my father's time, Samuel acknowledged, though there are still many constraints. Family expectations, social standing, financial considerations. He found himself relaxing slightly as the conversation took on the quality of a cultural exchange rather than a seduction. May I ask why these particular questions interest you? The sisters shared another glance before Toluta answered. Because we must decide whether to stay or to go, she said simply. Our father believes we should marry men from our band, remain with the people, keep our ways. But the reservation grows smaller each year, and the agent speaks of schools far away for the children, of breaking up the bands and making each family live separately, like white farmers. We see what's coming, Nahimana added softly, and we must decide if it's better to bend or to break. She took a drink from the small pot, then offered it to Samuel. This tea also opens the mind to truth. Will you drink with us, man between worlds? Samuel hesitated only briefly before accepting the pot. The gesture of trust seemed important, a bridge between their worlds. The tea was bitter, with herbal undertones he couldn't identify. What truth are you seeking? He asked as he handed the pot back. The truth of possibilities, Toluta replied. The truth of choices. She reached out and touched his weathered cheek with surprising gentleness. The truth of what it means to lie with a white man who respects Apache women. And there it was again, the proposition laid bare, impossible to misinterpret. Samuel felt his pulse quicken, despite his resolution to maintain boundaries. These were not naive girls, but women making a calculated decision. Still, he made one last attempt at caution. There would be anger if we were discovered. Your father has shown me hospitality. Nahimana moved closer, her knee now touching his through the fabric of her dress. Our father sleeps with the other men in the council wickiup on nights of important talks. The children sleep with their mothers. The rain covers all sounds. She held his gaze steadily. We are not asking for promises or for future claims, only for this night to learn and to share. You're ours tonight, Cowboy, Toluta repeated, the phrase no less provocative the second time. To teach and to learn from. Her hand moved to his shoulder, surprisingly strong and sure. The Apache sisters will pull you down into the straw, but only if you're willing. There was a gleam in her eye that might have been amusement or challenge. Samuel had faced countless dangers in his years on the frontier. Hostile warriors, gunslinging outlaws, flash floods, and blizzards. But nothing had prepared him for the honest directness of these women and the choice they placed before him. A choice that seemed to represent all the complexity of the changing West itself. The meeting of worlds, the exchange of knowledge, the forging of new understandings in the shadow of ancient ways. I'm willing, he said finally, his voice low but clear. Not as conqueror or as teacher, but as a man meeting women of strength and purpose. He touched Nahimana's hand lightly. Whatever knowledge I have is yours to take. Toluta's smile was like the breaking of dawn over the desert, sudden and transformative. Then we begin, she said, reaching for the ties of her dress, with the first lesson, that Apache women lead the dance. Nahimana laughed softly as she moved closer, her hands finding the buttons of Samuel's shirt with surprising deftness. And the second lesson, she murmured, is that knowledge shared is power multiplied. Her lips found his in a kiss that bridged cultures and histories, hesitant at first, then growing in confidence. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the small wickiup, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one of discovery and connection that transcended the boundaries of their separate worlds. As the sisters gently but insistently pulled him down into the sweet-smelling straw, Samuel surrendered to the moment, to the rare gift of being fully present in a space between worlds where new understandings might be forged. Morning broke clear and washed clean, the storm having spent its fury sometime in the pre-dawn hours. Samuel woke alone, momentarily disoriented until the events of the night came flooding back. He dressed quickly, unsure of the protocols that would govern the day after such an unconventional encounter. Would the sisters acknowledge what had passed between them? Would they expect some declaration or commitment? The complexities of cross-cultural relationships had never seemed more daunting. When he emerged from the wickiup, the camp was already alive with morning activities. Children chased each other around the central fire, where an older woman stirred a pot of what smelled like corn porridge. Men checked on horses that had been moved into the shelter of the canyon during the storm. And there, by the creek that ran along the edge of the camp, Samuel spotted Nehemana and Taluta, washing copper pots and speaking together in low voices. Hanska approached, offering Samuel a cup of strong coffee, a trade item clearly reserved for special occasions. "The storm has passed," the older man observed. "The path to Oak Creek will be muddy but passable by midday." Samuel accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks, studying Hanska's face for any sign of knowledge or disapproval regarding his daughter's nighttime visit. The Apache leader's expression revealed nothing beyond the customary reserve. "I'm grateful for your hospitality," Samuel replied. "You and your family have been most generous." Something flickered in Hanska's eyes, a knowledge or understanding that went unspoken. "The world changes like the seasons," he said after a moment. "Those who cannot change with it will perish. My daughters understand this better than many." He sipped his own coffee, gazing toward where the young women worked by the stream. "They carry the blood of warriors and the wisdom of healers. They will survive what is coming." There was something in his tone that suggested more than casual observation. A father's awareness, perhaps, of his daughter's strategies for navigating the dangerous currents of cultural change. Samuel remained silent, unwilling to confirm or deny any suspicions Hanska might harbor. After breakfast, Samuel prepared to depart. His mare had been well cared for, his saddlebags untouched. As he tightened the cinch, Taluta approached, carrying a small deerskin pouch. "For your journey," she said, handing it to him. Inside, he found dried meat and some kind of seed cake, trail provisions that would sustain him until he reached the trading post. "Thank you," he said, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared understanding. The night's intimacies remained unspoken, yet acknowledged in the subtle curve of her lips, the knowing gleam in her eyes. "We will see you again, Blackwood," she said, not a question, but a statement of intent. "When you next ride between the fort and the reservation." Nehemana joined them, carrying Samuel's canteen, freshly filled from the creek. "We have questions still," she said quietly, her eyes holding his, "about the world that comes, and perhaps you have questions too." Samuel nodded, accepting the canteen. "I do," he admitted, "more than before." He secured the canteen to his saddle, aware of the curious eyes of others in the camp observing this exchange. Knowledge is a journey without end. "Like the path between two worlds," Nehemana agreed with a small smile. She glanced at her sister, then back to Samuel. "Safe travels, man between worlds, until our paths cross again." Samuel mounted his horse, raising a hand in farewell to Hanska and the others who had gathered to see him off. As he guided his mare out of the hidden valley and back onto the main trail, he reflected on the night's unexpected lessons. He had come to the territory seeking silver and found instead the more precious metals of understanding and connection across the seemingly unbridgeable divide between cultures. The trail to Oak Creek was indeed muddy, churned by the night's rains into a treacherous ribbon of red clay. Samuel let his mare pick her way carefully down the steep inclines, his mind returning again and again to the wickiup, to the storm, to the sisters who had sought knowledge and offered wisdom in return. There had been no false promises, no romantic declarations, only the honest exchange between equals navigating the dangerous shoals of a world in violent transition. By midday, the trading post came into view, a cluster of rough-hewn buildings surrounding a dusty yard where freight wagons and saddle horses mingled. Samuel delivered his letters and medicines to Cooper, the trader, accepting a bunk in the crowded common room for the night. Men's voices, rough with whiskey and bravado, filled the air with tales of mining strikes, Apache raids, cavalry patrols, and the thousand small dramas that made up life on the frontier. Samuel listened but did not join in. His thoughts were still with the hidden valley, with the sisters who had pulled him down into the straw with a simple declaration: "You're ours tonight, cowboy." In a land where ownership and possession drove so much of the conflict between peoples, they had claimed him not as conqueror or conquered, but as equal participant in an exchange of knowledge that transcended the boundaries of race and culture. Perhaps, he reflected as he drifted toward sleep on the hard trading post bunk, therein lay the seeds of a different future than the one that seemed ordained by the relentless march of progress across the West. Not in grand treaties or government policies, but in moments of true meeting between individuals willing to see beyond the barriers of difference to the common humanity beneath. As he closed his eyes, Samuel could almost feel the soft touch of Nahimana's hand on his cheek, hear Taluta's low laugh as she whispered in his ear, "You're ours tonight, cowboy." And in that claiming had been not possession, but possibility. The possibility of understanding, of connection, of a path forward through the storm. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.